This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China's legislature approves proposal to improve Hong Kong's electoral system as the annual gathering concludes. At least 13 killed in latest Nigerian school attack. And civil society organizations in Africa call for a people's vaccine. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Two more stories making headlines this hour. Coming up in business news, Egypt plans a rail link between Cairo and northern Sudan. And Nigeria's forex reserves dropped by $1 billion, mounting pressure to Africa's largest economy. Chinese lawmakers have concluded their annual session. Key decisions were made on national development in the coming years. Among them, the National People's Congress approved a proposal to make changes to the electoral system in Hong Kong. Premier Li Keqiang met the press after the closing ceremony. Our reporter Su Huo has more.
赞成2895票，弃权1票。
With 2,895 deputies voting yes, 0 against, and 1 abstention, the Chinese legislature adopted the decision to improve the electoral system of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. The decision comes after deliberations and amendments over the past week.
The purpose of the decision is clear. It is to adhere to and improve the systemic structure of one country, two systems, uphold the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong, and ensure steady implementation of one country, two systems.
2021 marks the beginning of a new 5-year development plan for the country. Lawmakers also gave the go-ahead for the details of the 14th 5-year plan and long-term development goals by 2035. The NPC also approved the government work report, which set China's GDP growth target at about 6% this year. Premier Li said the target took into consideration of global uncertainties while allowing possibilities of a robust recovery.
We must avoid wide swings in economic performance because that will disrupt market expectations. Growth that is too fast will not be steady. A steady pace is needed for sustained development. So what we hope for such a big economy as China's is sustained and sound long-term growth.
On China-US relations, Premier Li said that disagreements and differences are unavoidable, but the two countries share common interests. He said both sides should respect each other's core interests and major concerns, and focus on cooperation rather than confrontation.
Despite multiple shocks last year, China-US trade reached 4.1 trillion yuan, up by 8.8%. We should put even more energy and focus on common ground and expand our common interests.
Experts say this year's 2 sessions carries extra weight because through the 14th 5-year plan, it is setting the tone for the country's next stage of development. And given complex geopolitics and an unpredictable international environment, China is surging ahead with concrete goals. And it's this kind of certainty that will hopefully give the world a boost as well. Su Huiao, CGTN at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing.
As China's legislature concludes its annual gathering today, the country's lawmakers are sharing their views on issues they're most concerned about.
2021 is the first year and the first step in China's future 5-year and even 15 years. By reading its budget, I found 3 numbers interesting. One is the defense budget, which is 6.8% growth. And second, the education budget has a 5% growth. And the science and technology, especially its basic science growth, is 9.1%. I can see it from the plan that China is very much supports fundamentals of China's future growth.
I'm very happy that Chinese National People's Congress has passed the bill to amend Hong Kong election law, and therefore we are able to restore peace and order to Hong Kong for long term. In the past few years, Hong Kong has gone through a lot of riot and social unrest. The passage of national security law last year has provided stability already, but for the longer term, we need to pass the election law, amendment to the election law, so it will provide a long-term stability with a stable political system. I'm sure people in Hong Kong can go back to work hard, and therefore economy in Hong Kong will be better, and our people's life will be better.
Chinese government or Chinese leaders emphasize we shouldn't let patriots to govern Hong Kong. Of course, every country in the world, they need a patriot to govern their own country or their own city. But at the same time, this is also high demand. The patriots not only should be loyal to their country, they should have the capability to govern and the capability to serve their people. I'm confident after the reform to be introduced, Hong Kong will have a bright future. Hong Kong's one country, two system will be maintained, and the society will restore to stability and prosperity.
At this year's two sessions, I'm particularly impressed by the country's plans to vitalize rural areas. As a representative from the agricultural field, I believe the ideas of ecological protection and green development are crucial. Next, I'll bring this wisdom to Guizhou province, where I come from, and dedicate myself to rural vitalization.
As someone involved in science and technology, I'm most excited about scientific innovation being included in the 14th five-year plan. China will gradually increase its science and technology expenditure above 7% in the coming years. This will mean an increase in scientific innovation and competitiveness, as well as bigger roles for science and technology workers who will also need to crack down on any bottlenecks in development.
I strongly support the setting of the GDP growth rate this year at 6% after strong efforts to curb the pandemic. I hope we can do it. I'll try to fulfill my duties in reaching this goal.
Chief Executive Carrie and her government have expressed support for the decision to improve Hong Kong's electoral system. Sudan has more.
Carrie said in a press conference that the Hong Kong SAR government will spare no effort in continuing to explain to the public about the necessity and urgency of improving the electoral system, as well as the solid constitutional basis of the decision. She believes that after plugging the loophole of the election committee, Hong Kong can stay true to the original aspiration in implementing the principle of one country, two systems and get Hong Kong back on the right track.
The central authorities take the initiatives from the national level to improve the system, aiming to ensure a number of objectives, having considered the actual situation. We all know what the actual situation is. The objectives is to ensure that Hong Kong can stay true to the original aspiration in implementing the principle of one country, two systems, and get back on the right track, and to ensure that patriots will be administering Hong Kong.
Carrie said the Hong Kong SAR government fully supports the fundamental principles adopted in the decision for guiding amendments to Annex 1 and Annex 2 of the Basic Law. While many may have no idea what exactly is this Annex 1 and Annex 2 is all about, actually Annex 1 is on method for the selection of the Chief Executive of the Hong Kong SAR, and Annex 2 is on method for the formation of the Legislative Council of the Hong Kong SAR and its voting procedures.
We're now joined by Dr. Cliff Mboya, a China-Africa expert and PhD graduate from Fudan University in China. Dr. Mboya, thank you so much for joining us. He is based here in Nairobi. Dr. Mboya, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang held a press conference Thursday. That was after the closing of the fourth session of the 13th National People's Congress. Doctor, what were the key issues discussed at the media briefing? We'll seem to have lost Dr. Cliff Mboya there. Let's continue now with other news that's making headlines. Let's go to West Africa now. In Nigeria's Kaduna state, authorities report that 13 people have been killed. The attack was carried out by unknown gunmen. Such insurgencies have become popular in the region, including a recent kidnapping of 300 students. The state's authorities say that so far 2,000 people have been killed or abducted by criminal gangs. For the latest on that, we are now joined by CGTN's Phil Ihaza, who is in Abuja for us. Phil, thank you so much for speaking to us. Phil, what more can you tell us about this latest attack on the school in Zamfara?
Thank you, Hannah. Well, it's quite unfortunate, these news and developments that we're hearing from different parts of the country with regards to kidnap and attackers from unknown gunmen. In this particular situation in Zamfara State, the state government and security operatives there are yet to confirm this particular attack, in spite of the fact that several locals have been, raising alarms about the attack on the junior secondary school there and how that, gunmen attacked the school. But the government has not come out to confirm that attack. I'm sure that they are doing their best to, of course, get the proper details and also update the populace as to whether there's been an attack. We also know that there's been a closure of schools, most schools, especially boarding schools in the state. So we're monitoring to get more details from the government, official statements, of course, and to know what efforts are being done if at all the attack is confirmed.
Phil, what more can you tell us about the latest developments regarding the gunmen who had kidnapped teachers and students in Edo?
Well, so for that particular attack in Edo State, that's South Nigeria, the police has confirmed the attack through its spokesperson, Bello Kotongs. He's fairly new in that position, and he's also stated that the police are currently on the trails of the abductors and that they are very, very positive that they would find and also rescue these kidnapped people. It's two lecturers and one lecturer and two students from the National Institute of Construction in Edo State, Uromi to be precise. It's a bit on the outskirts of Edo State, and they were writing their final exams for the semester. But the police have said that they are definitely on the trail of these attackers. This is not the first time we've seen cases of kidnap in the state. Just a few weeks back, the police was able to rescue and recover a kidnapped person as well, a top government official. So we just hope that this one will not be an exception, and the security operatives will be able to find and rescue these abducted ones, and of course bring the perpetrators to justice.
Thank you so much for that report. Phil Ihaza speaking to us from Abuja in Nigeria. Meanwhile, Nigerians who found refuge in Cameroon's Marua town after being displaced by Boko Haram have agreed to return home. This after a tripartite agreement was signed between Cameroon, Nigeria, and the UN's refugee agency earlier this week.
It's a happy day for these Nigerians. They now embark on a journey back home after 7 years of exile in neighboring Cameroon. In 2014, at the height of Boko Haram insurgencies in northern Nigeria, they fled, leaving behind everything they owned.
We are now returning to our village after all these years spent here at the Cameroon border. We are very happy and thank the authorities and the people of Cameroon for their hospitality.
About 103 people have been living in northern Cameroon's Mianawo camp near the border with Nigeria. Only 5,000 of them agreed to go back home to Borno State. The Global Conflict Tracker reports that conflict has been contained in Borno State. The Nigerian government and military has been pushing the insurgents out of the area, and in 2018, they assured that displaced people could return. The recent deal between Nigeria, Cameroon, and the UNHCR has ushered in a new dawn for them. With high hopes and optimism of relative peace, they are ready to start afresh.
Thank God we are healthy, because if we are well, you can go to the farm and we can get wood. We will also be able to provide for ourselves, even if the authorities have decided to give us oil, flour and salt. We want to give thanks to God.
the three parties have facilitated the process, with the UNHCR providing transport and tight security. Cameroonian President Paul Biya donated essentials, including food and mattresses, while Borno State government promised economic and social reintegration once they arrive.
The lives and properties of the returnees. In addition to this one, Borno State government will provide 30,000 naira each to all the heads of household. That means 30,000 times 5,000 is about 150 million naira. While the female, the wives of the heads of household will receive 10,000 naira each.
These displaced people who are returning home have tested negative for COVID-19, so a whole series of facilities have been put in place to ensure that this return is effective.
The state governor has also assured the returnees of safety in their villages. This, however, comes at a time when attacks have increased in northern Nigeria, including school kidnappings and bombings. The Boko Haram terror group began operations in the country in 2009 as a movement opposed to Western education. 11 years down the line, the United Nations reports the group has displaced about 2.7 million people and about 30,000 deaths. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
It's time now for us to take a short break, but still to come. In our Africa Panorama, we look at the impact of COVID vaccines distribution and the rise of vaccine nationalism.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Nigeria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, the coronavirus pandemic has been an unprecedented period in recent history, with reports of many lives lost, ravaged economies, and a state of collective pressure. Many nations have been keen on a vaccine that could slow down the disease. While several vaccines began production last year, when it comes to distribution, though, and availability to poor nations, a new challenge is threatening to derail the collective fight against COVID-19. CGTN's Lindy Mtongana takes a look at the rise of vaccine nationalism and Africa's position in the scramble for the few available doses.
For over a year now, Africa's healthcare systems have been stretched thin by the coronavirus pandemic. Over 100,000 people across the continent have succumbed to the disease, many of them doctors and nurses. With a second wave now spreading through parts of Africa, experts agree the only way to firmly end this pandemic is through widespread vaccination campaigns. Unfortunately, the majority of Africans may wait up to 2 years to receive their doses. In this episode of Panorama Africa, we take a look at unequal access to vaccines and life-saving medicines in Africa.
It's another busy morning at the Huatele oxygen plant here in Nairobi. Since 2014, this social enterprise has been quietly supplying oxygen to patients in public and private health facilities across Kenya. But it wasn't until the coronavirus pandemic that the country's health sector really paid attention to what happens here.
The most memorable time was around October, November last year, 2020. That's when the mortality was quite high. We had hospitals coming to this plant and basically fighting for oxygen.
Huatele had to boost production dramatically.
We had to hire more people so that we could produce 24/7. We had to expand our distribution infrastructure by leasing more trucks and importing more canisters, the cylinders, to allow us to meet the demand of the market. Basically, if we compare our pre-COVID and at the height of COVID, the demand doubled.
Though Kenya may have been spared the worst of the pandemic, Dr. Olayo and other experts are hoping vaccines will help ease the pressure on the country's healthcare system. Kenya has already received its first batch of just over 1 million AstraZeneca vaccines. A total of 24 million doses will be administered across the country in a 3-phase rollout. The first phase has already begun, targeting health workers, teachers, and those in the security sector.
Most Kenyans could be vaccinated by 2022, but the timelines are much worse in other parts of Africa, with full rollout expected to be completed by late 2023, if at all.
So why isn't Africa receiving the vaccines it needs? Let's take a look at how vaccines get to Africa. Most low-income countries will rely on COVAX, the WHO initiative aimed at securing 6 billion doses of vaccines for poorer countries. COVAX will only cover 20% of the population of each country. The first 2 billion doses will be administered in 2021, primarily to healthcare workers. The challenge is COVAX must first procure these vaccines, and this is getting harder as richer nations race ahead of poorer ones buying up crucial supplies. Canada has pre-ordered enough vaccines to inoculate its population 5 times over. The UK and the US have bought enough vaccines for 4 per person, while the EU and Australia will have 2 each. Consequently, the African Union has entered into bilateral agreements directly with vaccine manufacturers, successfully procuring 270 million doses of vaccines for the continent. But it's hardly enough for Africa's 1.3 billion people. Furthermore, these agreements tend to be more expensive. South Africa paid 2.5 times more than European countries for the AstraZeneca vaccine. To make matters worse, these orders have been complicated by export controls introduced by the European Union. This mechanism gives countries the power to deny authorization for vaccine exports if existing contracts within the EU have not been met. An alternative, as advocated by South Africa and India, is to push the World Trade Organization to allow for any patents related to COVID-19 vaccines to be waived. This means that anyone, anywhere, would be allowed to manufacture the vaccines quickly and cheaply.
It's in essence a very, very fair and very reasonable demand to say, listen, during the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic, we all need to be able to manufacture what can help us get out of the pandemic.
The proposal has received the support of the African Union, but has met stiff opposition from some of the world's wealthiest countries, including the European Union, the United States, and Switzerland, all of whom are home to major pharmaceutical companies.
It goes against the language, of course, of equitable vaccine distribution. So we can, of course, only speculate as to why they don't want to support the waiver, but the consequence, in essence, is that they don't want to share, and that's perhaps the reason. They don't want to share the ability and technology to manufacture vaccines.
It's a sad situation for the global health community because you'd imagine that this would be the only time when people's lives would matter more than profits. Even Kenya as a country has capacity to reconstitute and develop these vaccines if that patent was waived. We can do it quickly, and that would be the best way, produce and deploy quickly within the country.
Sadly, it's not the first time that Africa finds itself facing unequal access to life-saving medical treatments. In 1998, 39 international pharmaceutical companies sued the South African government over its attempt to buy cheap HIV medicines from India, rather than expensive antiretroviral drugs from the United States. Though the case was eventually dropped due to public pressure, the damage had already been done. Delays in procuring affordable ARVs resulted in many unnecessary deaths.
During a time of pandemic, it cannot be left to the market forces, to the monopolies of a few pharmaceutical manufacturers, to determine the availability and secondly, the price, in this case, of vaccines and in the past of ARVs. If we are reliant on the rest of the world, wherever that is, to supply our vaccines, Africa is going to be last in line again. And that is what we're seeing now with regards to COVID-19 vaccines.
The pandemic has exposed and exploited the inequalities of our world. There is now real danger that the very tools that could help to end the pandemic, vaccines, may exacerbate those same inequalities. Vaccine nationalism might serve short-term political goals, but it's ultimately short-sighted and self-defeating. We will not end the pandemic anywhere until we end it everywhere.
Vaccine nationalism happens when governments sign deals with drug manufacturers, especially the ones in their own countries, to exclusively supply the necessary medicines to their own populations, as is the case with COVID-19 vaccines. The world has also witnessed cases where governments push their companies to be granted exclusive rights to supply medicines during disease outbreaks, like the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. The Democratic Republic of Congo has also been a theatre of similar events, as the Ebola outbreak continues taking grim twists and turns. Companies from Asia, America and Europe competed to supply their vaccines to the Great Lakes nation. In the race for a COVID-19 vaccine, some African governments and private researchers were part of the groundbreaking medical achievements recorded, but it seems Africans were less appreciated as the bragging rights ended up in Western capitals. For example, phase 3 trials of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine were conducted on South African citizens in October 2020. In November, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine was tried on 400 volunteer Kenyan health workers. But when it comes to the acquisition and procurement of these drugs, it seems Africa is left playing second fiddle.
According to me, try it first on animals. See how it reacts, then and if it is okay, we will accept it.
My work has been affected, but if it is possible for everyone to be vaccinated, people will be free with life, freedom of movement, freedom to do their activities without the corona restrictions. That is my hope. I'm eagerly waiting for the vaccine.
I'll not get vaccinated and I'll not allow my family to do it. What if it has side effects? They could be revealed after many years. I don't trust new commercial vaccines.
I'm very scared, so I don't think I'll take it now due to what I'm hearing from people.
I'll take it because there's no problem taking it and to protect myself and protect others.
Dr. Olayo believes more needs to be done to address skepticism and misinformation.
So it's our responsibility as a public health community to educate the public and to explain to them the merits of vaccination. There's so many vaccines coming in. How different is AstraZeneca from Pfizer and from Johnson & Johnson? This is deep science that an average Joe will not understand. So you need, and he's supposed to take that vaccine and to bring his kids to take that vaccine. So we need to educate them.
A year on, the disruptive nature of the coronavirus pandemic has become the new normal, though there are some countries that are yet to embrace the importance of fighting on one front against this common enemy. So as long as vaccine nationalism dictates the means, COVID-19 shall be the end.
Well, civil society organizations in Africa have urged rich nations to end the blockade of intellectual property rights to allow formal negotiations at the World Trade Organization. The call comes as governments prepare to meet for another round of talks with the WTO. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports.
Months after India and South Africa made their initial proposal for a waiver on vaccine intellectual property rights, civil society organizations in Africa have added their voice. Representatives of over 20 CSOs across Africa have urged the US, UK, EU and the G20 countries to support South Africa and India's proposal at the next rounds of talks.
We should temporarily waive these rights that the pharmaceutical companies hold on to, so that the technology, the recipes, and the science of producing vaccines can be shared with countries that have capacity, so that we can quickly mass produce enough and safe vaccines and vaccinate everyone in the world and bring this disease under control.
This, they say, will allow scale-up in production and ensure Africa's equitable and affordable access to the desperately needed vaccines.
We are asking for the countries where these vaccinations have been developed, for them to give up the intellectual property related to the manufacturing and the production of these vaccines, and so that they can be produced in a more bigger and through economies of scale in other parts of the world, and to also effectively roll out the vaccination program across a bigger part of the population, including citizens here in Africa.
The group says a no vote at the World Trade Organization by any country will be considered a vote in favor of prolonged pandemic. The CSOs urged rich nations to refrain from any action that unduly impacts on state stability to ensure availability and accessibility of COVID-19 vaccines. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Business news is coming up after the break. Here's what you can expect. Egypt plans a rail link between Cairo and northern Sudan. And Nigeria's forex reserves dropped by $1 billion, mounting pressure to Africa's largest economy.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Time now for the business news. Egypt is seeking to fast-track construction of a railway line to reach the Sudanese city of Wadi Halfa. It will also extend a line in the north to Libya's Benghazi. The move is part of a wider railway scheme to facilitate easier movement of Egyptian exports to several African countries. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi ended a visit to Sudan's capital earlier this week, where he met with top officials to discuss relations as Khartoum continues its transition process. Business and economic cooperation were on the agenda of the talks, with the Egyptian president stressing the need to speed up construction of the railway line that will link the two countries. Preliminary works to commence the project has slowed down since last year due to the outbreak of the pandemic.
The railway goes from Tushka in Aswan all the way to the Halfa Valley in Sudan. It's a distance of 400 kilometers. There's 350 kilometers on the Egyptian side and 50 kilometers in Sudan. The initial budget for the project is just over $1 billion, and construction is set to begin next year. The road link, which is part of the Alexandria to Cape Town 10,000-kilometer highway, is being developed at a faster pace. The Cairo-Khartoum phase is 70% finished. The road is 1,100 kilometers long and is being built at a cost of 1.1 billion on the Egyptian side. I used the road from Cairo to Khartoum, and it's very good.
Investors believe the railway link will not only hasten passenger movement, but will also accelerate trade.
We are talking about Egypt, that has a population of 110 million people, and Sudan, which has 35 million. There is room for more cooperation. The infrastructure projects in transport will definitely boost trade, industry, agriculture, and services sectors between the two countries.
Bilateral trade between the two neighboring nations is estimated at $670 million. Plans are being put in place to double the amount as Sudan recovers from the 2019 uprising that toppled Omar al-Bashir's government.
Sudan is one of the largest meat exporters to Egypt. We also import sesame from Sudan. Egypt exports all kinds of building materials, infrastructure materials, medicine, and electronics to the country.
There are also different investments in Sudan, such as construction, investments in agriculture, as well as manufacturing. There is also a plan by the Egyptian Trade and Industry Ministry to establish industrial complexes for small and medium industries, in addition to economic free zones in Sudan.
The proposed railway link will eventually be extended to South Sudan and several Nile Basin countries, in a move that will strengthen trade exchange and boost cargo transport in the region. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Nigeria's forex reserves dropped by just over $1 billion in February as Africa's largest economy continued to experience low foreign inflows. The COVID-19-induced plunge in oil prices in 2020 amid rising import bills has contributed to Nigeria's forex reserves coming under pressure. Kelechi Emekalama reports.
Nigeria's foreign reserves stood at $36.19 billion at the beginning of February, then fell to $35.09 billion by the end of the month, a record $1.1 billion, according to data from the central bank, its lowest level in over 2 months. Experts blame the plunge on Nigeria's high drive for imports.
This is not unexpected. The new drop is not unexpected. It's been oscillating over the years, you know. Sometimes it will go up, sometimes it will come down, but it's essentially a function of our trade activity.
Because our industrial base, our consumption pattern, and everything that has to do with economic activities in Nigeria seem to be almost exclusively driven by our foreign exchange earnings. We have to import so many things. What it then means is that each time you have a hit on your foreign exchange reserves, we begin to look at ways to reduce our consumption. When, as a matter of fact, what we ought to do is to take a long-term perspective to try and reduce our reliance on those consumption patterns. So it will always be significant, and it will always impact almost every aspect of our economic activities.
The central bank says the plunge in its foreign reserve is nothing to worry about, as what's left is enough to serve the nation for the next 7 months. Nigeria is Africa's biggest crude oil producer. About 90% of its export earnings come from crude oil. But the nation still imports refined petroleum products as local refineries are worn and dated. Experts advise government to adopt a more proactive approach to boost the foreign reserve.
It is an invitation for us to be cautious really, about what we are going to be purchasing in terms of our overall, trade policy. What are the things that government should prioritize? How much effort should we put into looking inwards? What is our policy towards patronizing local content? If we continue to focus on our foreign items, we know it's going to put more pressure on the naira, and when there's pressure on the naira, it will lose its value.
If you can lose 1 billion over such a short period. And against the current scenario, by current scenario, I'm talking of the various factors in the economy, in the society, including the all-important security issues. You can lose billions just like that. And therefore, yes, 7 months seems to be double what the international criteria is. But it might not just be enough. And so, on that basis, I think there's cause for worry.
The central bank assures that it will continue efforts to boost and conserve the foreign reserve. Some measures include the reward policy that encourages formal diaspora remittances, targeting intervention schemes to support local production and growth of non-oil exports. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
The UK and European Union are trading blows again, this time over coronavirus vaccines. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has hit back at claims from Brussels that the UK has banned the shipment of COVID-19 vaccines abroad. As Tony Waterman reports, it's the latest clash between the two as the EU-UK post-Brexit relationship continues to fracture.
Boris Johnson hit this accusation head-on on Wednesday when he was in Parliament taking Prime Minister's questions. He said claims that Britain is blocking the export of vaccines abroad is simply not true, and that the UK should be proud of its vaccination program, with a third of the population now having received a first dose.
Let me be clear, we have not blocked the export of a single COVID-19 vaccine or vaccine components. This pandemic has put us all on the same side in the battle for global health. We oppose vaccine nationalism in all its forms.
Brussels, meanwhile, was remarkably mum on this latest clash with the UK over vaccine exports. The silence perhaps even more noticeable because it was contrasted so sharply to the unusually blunt accusation from the Council chief, Charles Michel, mincing no words in a newsletter Tuesday afternoon, saying that the UK and the US had an outright ban on vaccine exports and vaccine components. The facts don't lie, is what he wrote in that newsletter. And this highly charged claim sparked anger across the channel. The EU's envoy was summoned by the British government to come and explain this situation, but even that was tinged with post-Brexit tension. The EU only sent a deputy to the Wednesday morning meeting because the UK has yet to grant Europe's ambassador full diplomatic status. One EU official saying in a WhatsApp message, rather bitingly, that it's less convenient if the UK wants to summon the ambassador if there isn't one. Now, Charles Michel walked back the claims a bit in a late-night tweet, saying there are different ways of imposing bans or restrictions on vaccines and medicines, but this incident marks just the latest clash in souring post-Brexit relations. EU diplomats have now reportedly backed Brussels' plan to take legal action against the UK for unilaterally extending the grace period on checks to food entering Northern Ireland in a breach of the Brexit divorce deal. And some reports suggest that the move could influence whether Brussels grants the UK equivalents on financial services, which are, of course, a major contributor to the UK economy, but something not included in the Brexit trade deal. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
The U.S. Special Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, has confirmed that the world's biggest economy would lay out new financing commitments for the Paris Agreement to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Kerry announced a pledge after talks with French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire while in Paris. The former U.S. Secretary of State also met with French President Emmanuel Macron, with whom he also discussed climate change. John Kerry is in Europe this week to relaunch transatlantic cooperation in the wake of President Biden's decision to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord.
We can work together with France and its leadership and all of Europe and other centers of finance to be able to bring people together to harness the commitment of the marketplace to be a big partner in achieving this goal. No one nation can do this on its own. No one government can possibly do it on its own.
Nous voulons que la finance. We want finance to make itself fully available to the fight against global warming. We'd like to thank all the financial institutions, both private and public, which have already committed themselves to this green finance, particularly at the instigation of the President of the Republic. We believe that it is the nerve of the climate war. Finance is the nerve of the climate war.
Finance, c'est le nerf de la guerre climatique.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break, but here's what you can expect in global business later on. Well, South Africa records the first current account surplus in about 18 years. We have details on what this means to its economy. Let's now take a break. When we return, we'll look at how youth from difficult backgrounds get filming production training in Kenya.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
AMREP Health Africa launched the Child Protection Center almost 20 years ago. Its aim was to tame the explosive growth of street children in Kenya. The center has turned out to be a societal gem, and as CGTN's Nick Mudimba reports, it trains youths from difficult backgrounds in film production and that have transformed the lives of many. CGTN's Nick Mudimba now reports.
The Dagoretti Child Protection Center in the outskirts of Nairobi, Kenya. The reception is a trophy cabinet, a clear indication there's a wave of merit here. But this is not your ordinary child protection center. Thousands who have stepped in here have come out ready to face the world. In this setup, it's all about film production. We find a session going on. Everyone keen and inquisitive. The hunger to learn so evident. On the walls, quotes that cement the purpose of film production, photography, and the dynamics of a camera. They're all setting up a foundation of an exciting journey in the film industry.
It never made any sense to bring the kids here and not give them something to do. So getting them off the street was one thing. But when we brought them to a rescue center, we thought, what do? It does not add value for them to be in the streets.
AMREF developed and implemented the community-based child protection approach that is rescue, rehabilitation, resocialization, and reintegration with the goal of improving their health and welfare.
We've been able to rescue more than 26,000 kids off the streets. And the rehabilitation process was never easy, because remember, we never used to board them. And boarding meaning we never used to have boarding facilities here. So you still rescue them. And we used to have a lot of turnover.
But even as they are learning, they have produced critically acclaimed and award-winning films. The production have given a voice to marginalized children and youth in local, national, and international platforms through community screenings, mass media, and film festivals. The Cut, a film about a young boy trying to save his younger sister from female genital mutilation and a forced early marriage, received the award for Best Feature at the second edition of the Africa Diaspora Cinema held in Florence, Italy. The products have also been used for behavior change and social mobilization to respond to child protection and youth empowerment. Masha, as he is popularly known, joined the center 9 years ago. His family lacked school fees, but now he is a renowned actor, camera operator, and a film director. His resilience has brought joy in his family.
Many young people are money-oriented, yet there are so many opportunities out here. At times I ask some of my peers to come for training. Their first question is, how much am I being paid? That's one issue with the youth right now. I am just pleading with them to trust the process.
These young people are full of knowledge, they're full of different experiences, and when they come here to share, you find yourself also learning from them. So it's always a joy seeing them grow from the time they come here and the time
some of them are being employed or get opportunities outside there.
Apart from the film center, the social enterprise has been able to support 26,000 children with access to education. 850 adolescents have been facilitated to attain vocational training. Over 46,000 community members trained on child protection. 1,700 parents trained on child protection and parenting skills. Over 200 community opinion leaders trained on child protection. They all come here with zero knowledge about film and film production. But when they leave with their heads high and, of course, empowered big time. But there's something special about the lot that is experienced right now. They always come back here to mentor the young ones who are also going through the same process they did some time back. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
We begin the sports news with basketball. Rwanda's Patriots club will